All right, let's talk about evolution. Now, when you hear that word, you probably picture, giant dinosaurs, or maybe that famous chart of human evolution over millions of years. But today, we're going to zoom way, way in. We're getting down to the microscopic level to see what really makes all that big change happen. So that's the real question, isn't it? We get the big picture, but how does a species actually shift? Not over eons, but from parents to kids to grandkids. How does it work on the ground level? Let's dive in. To get our heads around this, we have to start small. We've got to look at these tiny little generation by generation tweaks that, over time, add up to the massive changes we see in the fossil record. And that brings us to our key term for today, microevolution. Okay, sounds a little sciencey, but the idea is actually super simple. It's all about watching the percentages of different versions of a gene, scientists call them alleles, change in a population over time. It's kind of like watching the popularity of certain traits rise and fall. Let's make this super clear. Imagine a big bag of marbles that represents all the genes for fur color in a population of mice. Some marbles are for brown fur, some are for black fur. Microevolution is just what happens when the percentage of brown marbles versus black marbles changes from one generation to the next. That's it. It's a shift in the population's genetic makeup. So what's causing those percentages to shift? What are the actual forces, the engines, that are constantly shuffling the genetic deck? Let's take a look. It really boils down to three main drivers. First up, you have random mutations. These are totally new genetic variations popping up. Second, there's non-random mating. It's not always a free-for-all. Individuals often pick their mates, and that means some genes get passed on more than others. And finally, you've got genetic drift, which is when pure random chance messes with the gene pool. Now, let's zoom in on that last one, genetic drift, because this is where things get really interesting. It's a super powerful force, especially in small populations. And this is where evolution can happen for no good reason at all. It's not about being the fittest, it's just dumb luck. So here's the deal. In a small group, random events can have a huge effect. Let's say you have just 10 mice on an island, and 5 of them happen to have a rare allele. Well, if a hawk just happens to swoop down and grab 3 of those specific mice, boom, the frequency of that rare allele just got slashed. That's genetic drift in action. And there are a couple of classic ways this plays out. The first one is called the bottleneck effect. Just picture a disaster, a wildfire, a flood, maybe a new disease that just wipes out most of a population. The few individuals who make it through are left to rebuild the entire population. But here's the thing, their combined gene pool is way smaller, and just by chance, it might look totally different from the original group. It's like having a bottle full of diverse marbles, and you shake it so only a few random, unrepresentative ones fall out. This second classic scenario is the founder effect. This is what happens when a small group breaks off from the main population and goes to start a new colony somewhere else, like on a remote island. The entire genetic future of this new population now rests on the shoulders of those few founders. So if one of those founders just happened to carry a really rare allele, well, that allele could suddenly become super common in the new population, way more common than it ever was back home. Okay, so we've covered the mechanisms, right? The engines of change. But here's the cool part. These forces don't just happen and disappear. They leave behind a trail of evidence, clues that are literally written into the bodies of living things. So let's put on our detective hats and see what we can find. This is the very question that fascinated early biologists. If life has been changing over time and we all share ancestors, shouldn't we see hints of that history in our bodies? And the answer they found was a huge, resounding yes. And these anatomical clues mostly fall into two camps. First, you have homologous structures. Think of these like family heirlooms. Different relatives might use an old pocket watch for different things, but you can tell they all came from the same great-grandparent. Then you have analogous structures, which are the exact opposite. They do the same job, but they have totally different origins. This is a perfect illustration. Look at the wings of an insect and a bird. They're analogous. They both get the job of flying done, but they were built from completely different starting materials, evolutionarily speaking. Now compare that to the arm of a human, the leg of a cat, the flipper of a whale, and the wing of a bat. These are homologous. They're used for totally different things, but underneath, they're all built from the same basic set of bones. That pattern screams shared ancestry. This table is a great little cheat sheet for these two big patterns. On one side, you have divergent evolution. You start with one common ancestor, and its descendants spread out and adapt to new lifestyles, causing their structures to become more and more different. This is what gives us those homologous structures. On the other side is convergent evolution. This is when totally unrelated creatures end up in similar environments and independently evolve similar solutions, those analogous structures, to the same problems. But the evidence isn't just in the big stuff, like bones and wings. The clues get even deeper, even more undeniable, when we zoom past anatomy and look inside the very cells and molecules that make us all tick. I mean, just think about it. Whether you're a human, a plant, a fungus, your life is built from cells. And all our cells use incredibly similar machinery, things like ribosomes and mitochondria to get things done. That fundamental unity, right there, is just staggering evidence for a shared origin of all life. And we can go even deeper still. When we actually compare the molecules, the DNA, the proteins, we find these mind-blowing similarities across species. And here's the key. For two different animals to build a similar protein, they absolutely must have similar instructions for it written in their DNA. And this quote just nails it. We can literally compare the DNA sequences between two species and calculate how similar they are. The closer the match, the more recently they shared a common ancestor. It lets us build these incredibly detailed family trees of life, and it confirms what the anatomy was telling us all along. Okay, let's take a quick pause and put all of these pieces together. We've seen the small-scale engines of change and the massive trail of evidence they leave in their wake. So, here's the big takeaway. Microevolution, those little shifts in gene percentages from mutations, mating, and random chance, that's the engine that's always running. And the proof that the engine's been running for billions of years? It's everywhere. It's in the bones that connect our arms to a whale's flipper, and it's in the DNA that connects us to, well, pretty much everything alive. And that really brings us to the final thought. This stuff isn't just ancient history locked away in fossils. Microevolution is happening right now, all around us. So the question I want to leave you with is this: where do you see it? From bacteria becoming resistant to our drugs, to insects adopting to our pesticides, where can you spot these engines of change working in the world today?